My guest today is Ross Allison, who, among other things, but I don't know what they are, is one of the world's premier ghost hunters. And I think that's good enough, to be honest. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm fine. Devoid of ghosts. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
No ghosts here.
I guess that's
anyway.
Good.
Let's kind of start at the beginning with, what's your backstory? How did ghost hunting become your thing?
Well, I actually blame my mother.
Good choice.
Grew up, yeah. There are some things you can blame your parents for, and my mother loves ghost stories. I grew up listening to these stories and was very fascinated with them. So it just that stirred that curiosity. And then as I was living in the Bay Area in California, I actually decided to pursue it a little bit. I took, a few Lloyd Auerbach's classes and lectures. And then when I moved back to Washington, I really wanted to continue to pursue it. But ghost hunting wasn't as popular as it is today. So
what year is this?
It's actually would have been 2000.
Okay.
Yeah. So I moved back to Washington, wanted to do some ghost hunting. It was around Halloween. What a perfect time to do it. And so I just got on the phone with all my buddies and I said, hey guys, let's do some ghost hunting. There's this great cemetery down the street. And they're like, yeah, let's do that. Let's all hit the bars first. And I realized a bunch of drunk guys in a cemetery is not a good thing.
So once the excitement of doing it properly, if you like, was over, what was your purpose? Was it to actually find ghosts or to find paranormal in general, if you like?
Well, it's always been to have some sort of answers as to what's going on. One of the things that we still are in this debate about is, is there the existence of life after death? That's one of those things that, people will debate about is, there's no such thing as ghosts, but you can't prove that ghosts don't exist either. And so there's a lot of your own personal experiences that apply to this, because as I've been doing this for close to 30 years now, when you have these unique experiences, and even when you apply that fair share of skepticism, you still question yourself, like, what was that? How do I explain that experience? So I've always pursued this field, the fair share of skepticism, but I also have to realize that, there's a level of, psychic phenomena that we're not sure about, and the psychological aspect of it as well. But I still continue to feel that there is something intelligent out there. There are levels of phenomena that doesn't apply to a psychological experience or psychic phenomena. So there's something out there, and I still strive to find those answers.
Well, yeah, I'm on your side. I'm not coming to this from the side of a skeptic at all, which obviously, otherwise it would be a really terrible interview, right? But over those last 20 years, an awful lot of equipment appears to have come onto the market. 20 years ago, you didn't have any of your gadgets. You just turned up and waited to see if something would happen, right?
Well, old school ways, you still had your cameras and your recorders, your audio recorders. Those are your two, main pieces of equipment that you use. But yes, technology has advanced and continues to advance and has opened a few more doors. But one of the biggest problems that we have, though, is a lot of ghost hunters are what I call, I hate to say it, lazy ghost hunters. They're looking for the instant gratification, and they don't want to do the work of having to review hours upon hours of audio and video.
Which is boring as hell, right?
It is. I totally agree. So they turn to apps on their cell phones and other devices that unfortunately are very suggestive. And so they produce a false reality as to what is real evidence and what is just that suggestive evidence. And also, too, the problem we have is a lot of these apps are manipulated by the person creating the app that produces. They actually put pre-recorded audio in them. They put, fake images in them. And so if you look at the fine prints, it's mainly for entertainment purposes only. They even say this cannot validate, paranormal phenomena. But a lot of these teams are dependent on that now to heighten their experience whenever they're investigating the paranormal. So now it's a situation where we do have to be extra careful as we get into more interesting levels of technology, that there is a lot out there that is manipulating the ghost hunters as well.
What's been the game-changing piece of kit that turned up then?
Well, I think for one, digital photography was a big changer in our field. I remember back in the day when we had to use film. So, digital photography is great because, again, you get that instant result. You can see right away and not have to wait and develop your film. So that is a nice thing, Of course, digital audio is great as well. But I've always told people one of the things you can't forget is our roots. We were actually capturing phenomena back in the day with film and audio, the analog, sources. And I really feel that we could be missing out on some of the phenomena that could be out there. But, thermal imaging is great. It's now affordable for most people. That's another big thing that I think helps. Because I remember back in the day when we wanted to get a thermal camera, and they were like, $10,000.
Yeah.
So now you can easily get a thermal camera for, $300. So, yeah.
That's that's when you look back. When I was a kid, so I was born in '67, so I was an impressionable teenager. Late '70s, early '80s. There were lots of books, and of course, the books were just full of really famous photographs.
Mm-hmm.
There's one here I had to write down because I kept forgetting what it's called. The Spectre of Newby Church, which is the famous one with like a church organ, and to the right of it, there's a ghost with like a cowl on it. I don't know if I can send it to you.
No, I know which one you're talking about. I'm very familiar with the old school stuff.
I'm sure.
So, and then there's the brown lady coming down the staircase. That's another famous one. Yeah.
Well, I find that 2021, the ghost hunting world or the paranormal world in general is really geared up for capturing something on video, when I am more than happy with a great ghost picture.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't seen a ghost picture for years and years. But then I get that a lot of them have been manipulated, perhaps, or not.
Well, that's the problem. Is it's so easy today to manipulate the evidence. A grade school kid could do it now. With their cell phones. Editing is so easy to put in a ghost image in your photo. So we're constantly going to be questioning ourselves. And that is another big problem that we have in this field is there's no strict protocols when it comes to ghost hunting. Everybody kind of does it their own way. And I feel if we had a structure in how we proceed in capturing phenomena, then when somebody does submit possible evidence, we wouldn't have to question them. We would think, okay, we know you followed the rules, so maybe what you do have is legit. But now with, these, technology being so easy to manipulate, that's the biggest problem is we're going to be constantly questioning each other. Is this a real ghost photo, or are you just looking for some attention or to get on another television show? That's the downfall to the popularity of this.
There's never been more ghost shows on TV than there is at the moment. I can't remember whose Yvette Fielding's show over here has been running for so long. I can't remember what it's called. Is it just called Ghost?
Most Haunted?
Most Haunted, that's it. That broke a few barriers, and there have been some really good episodes too. The nature of a TV program is that you expect something to happen every week, and I know from experience that ghost hunting is what 95% nothing at all.
Pretty much.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's just sitting around in the dark, waiting for something to happen, and it doesn't always happen. So a lot about being at the right place at the right time. So you got to understand with the television shows, they have to entertain their audience. If you're not entertained, you're not going to stay tuned in. You'll move on to something else. You'll get bored. And so people need to understand that that's a level of manipulation as well. Is people, see these exciting things that happen on these television shows, and then they want to get involved in ghost hunting, and they expect to have those things happen every time they ghost hunt. And it's not like that. I've always said it's about 1 out of 10 cases that's going to provide some sort of evidence that there could be something going on. So again, all about being at the right place at the right time.
What's been the highlight of your adventures so far?
Oh my God, there's been so many.
Has there so many been? Is it like more than 20, more than 50, or?
It's hard. I've never actually numbered them, because I've had the opportunity to travel all over the world.
Yeah.
I've been to the UK. I did a castle tour a few years back. Got to, go to Chillingham Castle, which is amazing. And then went out to Scotland and, did spend like 3 nights at Roslin Castle. And then, went out to, let's see, where was it?
You've been to the Ram, haven't you? The pub.
Ancient. Oh, yeah, God, yeah. Yes. That was another amazing place. That was back when the elderly man still ran it. I remember he passed away a few years back. And that was an interesting experience because I remember being up in the attic space and we asked for a sign, and all of a sudden we heard what sounded like pounding on the roof and couldn't explain that. So there's so many amazing places and adventures when it comes to ghost hunting, and being that, I've even had the opportunity to investigate every state that we, have in the U.S. So it's really hard to pinpoint, my favorite. When it comes to certain, topics or subjects, I could probably do a little bit better.
I mean, what did I write here? One of the places you went to is Satan's Harvest, related to the Conjuring movie. Have I got that right?
No, it's related to what they're trying to get into. Frenchie is a character related to the Satan's Harvest story.
Right.
So he was introduced, that character was introduced when they did The Nut. And I believe they are going to tell his story in one of the future films that they're working on.
Okay.
So, and that is a story where, unfortunately, his father was believed to be possessed, and there was all these stories about murder-suicide took place in a farmhouse, and that somehow that whatever possessed his father is now possessing him. So I went out to the spot where the farmhouse once stood. It burned down many, many years ago. But this is the farmhouse that his father ran, and apparently this is where we actually were out in the fields where we believe the foundation was, and we actually picked up what sounded like almost like a growling in the background and of an EVP.
If ghost hunting was like some of the modern horror movies, you'd be a bag of nerves, right?
Oh, yeah. I can tell you right now, half the people wouldn't be doing ghost hunting that they are doing now. It's one of those, when you do have those rare experiences, it does boost the adrenaline, and you realize, wow, that there is something to this, but for me, I think my way of pursuing this is I've always been a very, respectful person when I go into a place and investigate. And so, people always ask, how do you do it when you come across these negative energies? And I think, yeah, there are negative energies out there, and some have been known to hurt people. But I think the best way to pursue an investigation like that is just to be very respectful to whatever it is. And that has kept me safe, I guess, throughout these years.
Yeah, is when you get called out or go on your own off your own back, I guess it's easier to look for bad spirits than good.
Well, I think for most people, it's more exciting, when you go into some of these places and it's almost like going to an amusement park.
Yeah.
Or the Haunted Mansion at Disney World or Disneyland or, stuff like that. I think we are driven by the adrenaline rush when you go into a place and you get in on a roller coaster and you have that fear of like, oh, my life is in danger. There's that excitement that I think people strive off of. And I have to remind people that, it can be exciting when you go into a place and you are getting results right away. But you also have to understand that you are dealing with the unknown. And I would say that, why would you put yourself in a situation where it can harm you, and it can harm you very seriously in some situations?
Mentally,
physically, there are some cases where people have been pushed out of windows. You don't want to be pushed out of a 3-story window. That's not a good thing.
no, not by a ghost.
People, yeah, and some of these people even, put the physical attacks aside. There are people, and it still happens today quite often, that will trespass into abandoned buildings that aren't safe, and they get hurt there. Falling through the floor, or falling down the staircase that collapses on them. That happens as well. So, don't think that it's just the paranormal you have to be afraid of. It's these environments that you put yourself into as well.
Yeah, there's a house where in the small village where I was born in Wales. You may be aware of it. It's called Plasteig. It was a big house by anyone's standards in the UK. And a guy called Judge Jeffries used to live there, as far as I recall. And one of the rooms, he used to sentence people, and they just hang them in the room. And then
I'm not familiar with this one.
And there's a floor that kind of gives like this, where they just cut the rope, drop the bodies out of the house. Anyway,
wow.
I'll send you a link later. Now, it was abandoned for years. So when I was in my early 20s, we used to go there quite often. There was a tree growing. You could get in the house. There was a tree growing up. It was just desolate. You couldn't walk up the stairs, as you say, because you just fall through them. The very nature of an old abandoned house that was rumored to be haunted is very appealing when you've had a couple of beers and you're with your friends.
Sure.
Now, we never saw anything there, but we didn't have to. You can go there in the day and it's spooky, just the sheer adventure of it. But
right.
But around this time, I was really into magic, Crowley, Ouija boards. The whole I'm a metalhead kind of thing. But many years later, well, not many years later, maybe 10 years later, a friend of mine had an aunt who was a psychic, and I met her a couple of times, and just out of interest, she did a past life regression with me, and I'd met her a few times socially with my friend at barbecues and things, and she got breast cancer, and a little while later, I moved 300 miles away to where I am now, so I'm very far away, and I'm sitting at the table doing some work, and I look up, and she's there in front of me for a split second, but it was weird. It wasn't a visual recognition. I just knew who it was. So I called my friend up, and the first thing he said to me was, "Oh, has Jean been visiting you as well?" I didn't even have to mention it. And that gave both of us pause. We were like, we believe in ghosts. We're really into paranormal, supernaturally things. But this is something that's actually happened. It wasn't good or bad. It was just, wow, there's something there, and I know who you are. Very odd, very odd.
Well, it's an amazing experience, though.
But it's a kind of a spiritual thing rather than the ghost thing. But my point being, how do you draw a line between the spiritual aspect and the ghost aspect of it, the spooky ghost, if you like? Do you find that a lot? Is there a lot of spirituality or religion in when you go hunting?
Well, that's another issue that we have in this field is it is so diverse. There are a lot of people that are focusing more on the religious aspect of the paranormal rather than the scientific. And I tend to be more scientific. I want to have more readings to validate your experiences, my experiences, just to show that there is something to this. As I've always said, it doesn't take much to convince the believer that there's ghosts. So I tend to go for more of the challenge. So I think for me, it's always been more of the science. I want to validate these experiences. I want to confront the challenge of presenting the evidence to the skeptic and say, hey, here's what I got. What do you think? And it's not about just having one piece of information to validate that experience. I'm trying to go with 2 to 3 pieces of information to validate that one encounter. And I think that's what we need to do more in this field. It's great to pursue the field with the fact that, I'm a believer. I just want to have those experiences. But it's more challenging when you pursue it from my perspective as to, great, you said you saw a ghost of a friend that passed away. How do I prove that?
Yeah.
Right now it's just a personal experience. And those personal experiences are great and are comforting, especially when you're dealing with loved ones that have passed on. But it's just so much more to it that I think we're drawn to. We want more information, especially for those who are still questioning life after death. I think for those, even myself, I've had enough experiences to know there's something to this, but I still question what is next after this life.
Do you get on well with psychics from that point of view?
I do. I do believe there are people out there that are very tuned into the environment. I think we all have the possibility of having very psychic moments throughout our life. Your experience that you just told me could have been a psychic experience. I think, it's very possible. But it's another challenge of validating what a psychic is picking up. That's another element, trying to prove ghosts. You also have that on the aspect of trying to prove somebody's psychic abilities. And so I really do strive to build credibility when it comes to those who may be a little more sensitive. Like when I work with people who may be psychic or sensitive, when I take them on an investigation, they do not know where they're going. The only information my team knows when we investigate is what city it takes place in, and if it's a private home or a business. That is it. And I feel that it just helps to build the credibility that when they actually have experiences, we can say we didn't give them any leading information.
How is that quest for credibility going for you, if you like?
It's still a challenge. It really is. I wouldn't say badly. It's coming along to the point where, luckily for me now, I've had a scientist join my team, and we've been working together to validate these experiences by building more unique equipment. We're not a team that's dependent on an EMF detector and on that quick blimp to say, oh, that was a ghost. We are building more equipment that's going to help to validate that blimp, that validates, even a psychic could be in a room, and we'd have the equipment to hopefully validate that there is some environmental changes going on to prove that, okay, there is something here. What is it? We don't know. So I think as technology advances and becomes cheaper and more affordable for us to acquire, we'll be able to bring more to the table. And one of the things that I've always told people is there's nothing wrong with too much data. We need more data, and not enough groups are trying for data. Like I said, right now, they just want that instant gratification.
Yeah.
They want to go in with their ghost box and hopefully hear a voice, call out their name, and that's enough for them. And there's just so much more to it than that. And I think we're getting there.
Is this? I mean, it was completely unheard of 20 years ago to see that somebody was lecturing on this stuff at universities or even speaking about it. You've probably been shot at the gate, right? But how? What do you teach the science when you lecture? Do you teach the science? Is this the kind of thing you get into, or do people just want the sensationalism?
It's a little bit of both. It's a little both. I have no problem adding the science to it, but not too much, because when you start throwing numbers, the zeros and ones out there, people's eyes just gloss over. The science is kind of boring to a lot of people. But as long as I said, if you've got different points of evidence to validate one experience, then I think that helps to build the credibility in this field. So I can talk about an amazing experience that I've had and share that ghost story, but it makes that ghost story even better when I can say, oh, and we got this reading to validate it, and we got this photo to validate it. So it just makes that experience that I've had, which wasn't a personal experience, now more credible for the audience as well.
I mean, sorry, go on.
Well, I was just saying, I think that's where the science is going to be more helpful in validating these encounters that we have.
What's strange with this is, and again, this is coming from someone who's on your side, is who. It's kind of it's almost one of those things where there's nobody to prove it to. The people are always going to question, and no matter how much data you come up with, unless they're there, kind of.
And that's a very good point. You're right. If anybody is skeptical, you're right. I could have the best video of a ghost coming right up to the camera going, boo, I'm a ghost. But if you don't know me or know my credibility, you're just going to question it. And so that's where I think we fall short in this field, is we're not doing enough to build the credibility in this field, because it's so easy to fall into the sensationalism of ghosts and the fear factor, and again, not have to collect the data to validate these experiences. So that's where you kind of find yourself the lone wolf in all of this.
But then it's when you look at it from afar, it's not that different than believing in God. Not really.
No, it's not.
It's the same.
Yeah, it's all based off of faith.
I mean,
a lot of
ghosts have been around for forever.
Well, if you're going to bring the Bible, the Bible even talks about ghosts. There was the fact that when I wrote my book, Haunted Churches. I even dove into the Bible and scriptures, and we even have the fact that when Jesus was seen walking on water, people thought he was a ghost, and they even referred to him as a ghost.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. So there are, talks in the Bible of communicating with the other side, with the dead. So this goes clear back to that time as well.
And probably further back, if you could.
And further back, you got stories, Roman stories, where there was a haunted inn, and they talked about, hearing, the chains and the moans and stuff, and no one would want to stay in this haunted inn. And so there's another really old ghost story.
That's classic Scooby-Doo.
It is.
Rattling chains and moaning. I mean, it does. It is a bit Scooby-Doo to a lot of people, which is. But Scooby-Doo is such a great show. Like, what the hell, I have a question. It's a good one that I don't know the answer to, which is, what is the difference between a ghost and a shadow person? This is a new phrase to me.
Well, again, the field has become so diverse, and a lot of people want to label everything. So we have these different levels of hauntings. Oh, this is a poltergeist haunting level 3. Well, to be honest with you, there's no such thing as a level 3, haunting. We have to go with what we know and not with what we think we know. And I think a lot of times people try to label everything that they encounter. Me, I feel that a shadow figure is just another level, or I should say another aspect of an apparition. And again, this is all based off of theories and ideas. We don't have all the answers. But if we consider the fact, if we go with the basics, when we consider ghosts or energy, all right, and you add a little more energy to that, maybe you have what you feel is the presence. When you walk into a room, you feel that there's somebody in the room when you can't see them. Well, let's add a little more energy to that. Maybe now you will see, light anomalies. Maybe you might hear sounds now. Now, if you add a little more energy to that, maybe now this is where you'll start to see the dark, shadowy figure. And then you add more energy to that, and now you get light, and you get, an apparition. And you add more energy to that, and maybe now you get the solid, where you see that there is an actual figure there. And you think it's another person in the room when they just disappeared.
So it actually has form at that.
It has form.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think for me, when it comes to shadow figures, I just think it's another form of apparition. It just does not have enough energy to produce light to give you color and different variances. So that's my personal belief. But I know there are people out there that'll say that, ghost shadow figures are a different entity of its own. But to be honest with you, there's not enough information to validate that.
Okay.
So people, run off their own belief system. And so that's where I've always said, go with what you know and not with what you think you know.
Okay. So going even more complex than that, if you, and probably off subject a little bit, have you had dealings with exorcisms?
I've dealt with situations where, one of my most interesting experiences was, and I'll tell you this story because everybody loves this story. I do lecture at colleges and universities all over the world, and I was lecturing at St. Louis University. Now, St. Louis University is where the true exorcist case took place. And if you're not familiar with the case, the story is that the boy was brought to the campus because the church that was involved is actually on the campus. And so they brought him to the area. Now, when I do my lecture, a lot of times the campuses will let us do a ghost hunt throughout the campus. So the students will take me to all the places that they hear are haunted. And they had taken me to the building right next to the church. And at the time, the church had owned this building at one time. In fact, it was used. The nuns lived on the 4th floor. They did Sunday school there. But since then, the church has sold it to the campus. So now it belongs to the campus. So we go through all the different floors. It's nothing unusual than an old historic building on a campus. But then when we got to the 4th floor, it was completely abandoned and run down. And I was surprised by this. I was like, wow, why is, this huge space, just abandoned? You would think a campus would utilize the space maybe for storage or dorms or something. And the students tell me that they've had so many problems on the 4th floor that they've completely abandoned it. And when they say problems, they're kind of referring to paranormal problems.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, this is intriguing. So we kind of go around and we go through all the different rooms, and they take me into this one room and they say this is where a nun had committed suicide. And I'm thinking, that's great, because this is a nice lead.
And nuns make great ghosts.
They do. They make the best ghosts. So we go through all these different rooms, and I go into these old classrooms, and they still have the little desks for the kids to sit at, and the old chalkboards are still on the walls. And I finally get into this one room, and I'm the first one to walk into the room. And right when I walked in the room, I heard this crunch underneath my feet. And I looked down and I realized I had stepped on a dead bird. Now, this was not unusual for me. I've been in a lot of abandoned places, so animals do get trapped and die in some of these places. So I just kind of kicked it over the side so no one else would step on it. But when I shined my light through the rest of the room, I was surprised to find that this room was filled with dozens and dozens of dead birds. Now, I had been through most of the fourth floor. I had not seen anything like this. And one of the other things that was kind of interesting is security had removed all the doors on the fourth floor because they've had too many problems with students sneaking around up there. It just made it easier for them to do their rounds.
Right.
So I realized that these birds had access to the whole fourth floor. Why did they choose to die in this one room? Well, come to find out, this is the room that the boy had stayed in. Now, research has shown that the church believed that they could not perform a full exorcism on the boy in the church because this could possibly kill him. So they had moved him to various secret locations, performing multiple exorcisms on this boy. This is one of those rooms where they had performed an exorcism. So creep factor's gone up a little bit here. Now, believe me, I've been in some of the deepest, darkest places you can imagine, and I've hardly ever been fazed by this, but this room has got me a little uncomfortable. I will admit that. So I'm in this room. I've got the students, coming in behind me, and they have, some of the basic equipment. And we stand in this room and we're doing a little, EVP session, electronic voice phenomena, if you're familiar with that, the voices that appear that shouldn't be there. So we're, and things are, we're in this room for less than 5 minutes when things just start going off like crazy. The EMF detector's going off like crazy. We can't figure out what's causing the EMF readings. The compass is spinning around and around and around, and it will not stop. And it's starting to get colder and colder in the room, almost to the point where I'm expected to see my breath. So I got to document this. I got to prove that this is really happening. And pictures aren't going to prove it. So luckily, my camera shoots an infrared video. So I switch my camera over to video. I start filming everything that's going on, and things start to slow down a little bit. So I realize, okay, before it stops, let's continue with the EVP session. So I happen to ask, can you tell me whose room this is? There's a few seconds of silence when all of a sudden I hear crying to the left of me. And I turn and I realize that a couple of the female students have started to cry because they're so terrified being in this room. So I realize, okay, they're uncomfortable. I have to admit, I'm a little uncomfortable. So let's go ahead and wrap it up and move on to another location. So we move on to a different location. Now, I was hoping to go back and continue on with my investigation, but I didn't get a chance that night. But when I did finish my lecture tour and I got home and I started reviewing all the evidence that I collected from the campuses, I got to that video. And I got to the part in the video where I asked, can you tell me whose room this is? To my surprise, I caught 2 responses. Now, I'll edit this for your audience, but it basically says, F you, it's mine.
Now, my audience can handle that very much. Yeah.
So that was pretty interesting. And I would have to say that's probably the closest when it comes to an exorcism that I've come across. I've dealt with situations where people felt like there might have been something in them. But for something like that, I would definitely want to have the right people involved. I'm not, a religious or a highly religious person, I should say. I'm not trained to do exorcisms. I would definitely, suggest getting clergy involved in that type of situation.
Yeah, where I was going with that was a lot of people kind of perceive that. Well, I would say that an exorcism is needed for possession, and I always assume that possession is by demons, if you like, not ghosts.
But there's a lot of cases out there where people have been claimed to have been possessed by, a relative, somebody that they knew, or somebody who previously lived in the house. So it's not always demons, as a lot of people would like to say. Is possession possible? For me, I would have to say I keep an open mind. I do believe that people can become in a weakened state mentally and physically, and that very well could be an opportunity for something stronger to take over you when you're in that weakened state of mind and body. That's why they say a lot of times when this does happen, it can happen also when you're, just falling asleep, when you're unconscious. Those types of things can also happen as well. So I think it's very possible, but I also will have to say that I don't always believe that it's the negative. It's not always the demon. It could very well be other situations and very positive spirits as well that can take advantage of the situation.
That all went a bit Sam and Dean Winchester on you there. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
I mean, it's funny if you hit the internet and look for a ghost hunter, you will find many. If you look for a demon hunter, there are none. Do such people exist?
There are people out there that would like to carry the title demonologist. And, we got the very famous the Warrens out there.
Yeah.
Ed and Lorraine, they would say that they were demonologists. But I think the term is misused quite often or misunderstood because media has taken such a hype on demons because it's scarier. All the television shows want to deal with demons now. Because it builds up that excitement, that fight or flight, situation that we like to get ourselves into. But here's the thing. It's misused, and it's, I hate to say, but it's used in situations just for the excitement, and people are lying about the experiences or misled by their experiences because they think just because they have a negative experience, they want to say, oh, it's a demon. That's not always the case. I've always said you can have negative experiences from just Joe Schmo because Joe Schmo was an asshole,
Yeah.
Let's put it out there. But
everybody grows up with ghosts, don't they? From when you're 4, 5, you grow up with ghosts. But once you enter the realm of talking about demons, that in the real world, that's pretty hardcore occult shit, right?
It is. And the fact of the matter is, if you go to scripture, when a lot of people want to bring out these, ghost devices, and the funny thing is the ghost device will tell you you have a demon in your home. A demon is not going to announce itself. If you go to scripture, a demon's purpose is to manipulate the living into committing sin, right? So a demon is not going to tell you, if you ask in the room, is there a demon in the room? A demon's not going to raise his hand and say, yeah, I'm right over here. A demon would say, oh, yeah, I'm your Aunt Joe, come hang out with me. That's what a purpose of a demon. So when people sit there and say, oh, yeah, my device just said demon, so there must be a demon in the room, that there's nothing out there man-made that's going to tell you have a demon in your room. Sorry. That's just all fake stuff out there.
Let's get working on that app.
I wish it was that easy, believe me.
But it's odd, isn't it? How we grow up with ghosts, and they're very acceptable from a very, very young age.
Well, I think I think, being that we come from two different parts of the world, there is a little more skepticism in America, as I've learned, when it comes to more of the European, cultures.
Yeah.
You got a lot more history on your side of the water, and so you have that culture where you grow up with the fact that any house you live in is over 100 years old.
Yeah.
In most cases.
The one I'm in is at least 150. That's what
Yeah.
about as old as America, right?
Exactly. That's the point I'm making. It's like you come to America, and most of our history is on the East Coast rather than the West Coast. So you got we're a lot younger in that situation. So we, from Seattle's over 150 years old. So we don't have a lot of history, and so we're not really in touch with a lot of historical locations.
Yeah.
In fact, America doesn't always, and I hate to say it, that even European countries now are losing touch with their history because they don't want to hang on to these old places. They want to tear them down for new places.
I totally agree with that. Absolutely.
And so, yeah, and that's a sad fact. We are so eager to tear down our history for the future, and that maybe we are losing grasp and that those opportunities to have those experiences. Where you got castles in your backyard. We don't have that,
Yep. I got one 2 miles away.
There you go. And I'm jealous of that. I love it. But I think that's another thing too, where our culture is a little more different. Yeah, we come from a European base, and some of those teachings were brought over to America, but I think we've lost touch with that. And so we are dealing with a new country, or I should say a younger country.
Yeah.
And we don't have those opportunities to be in touch with history as much.
But as you drift very far south to Mexico and so on in South America, they must have a huge, like an even bigger history of ghosts and
every culture
than we have over here.
Every culture has their own belief system, and you find a lot of that, especially when you get into these older, countries, that they're more in touch with their history. The Hispanic, culture is very much believers in ghosts. You got, even Asian cultures are very much into the ghosts. Their ancestors, and they worship their ancestors. And, they have a belief, too, that, if something tragic happens in a location, you stay away from it because it becomes, bad juju. You don't deal with ghosts. You avoid ghosts in all aspects. So you have a lot of these different cultures where, ghosts are a big part of their everyday life.
I think the Japanese do ghosts excellently. Out of all of us, the Japanese do it really well. And
they have some of the best horror movies too.
I was just going to say that. I mean, the original of The Ring and the original Grudge are just harrowing. And what's the other one called? Dark Water.
Oh yeah.
Wow, that's a spooker.
Yeah,
they've got some really good stuff going on, and the Koreans as well, actually. The Koreans make a lot of movies, but.
I've had the pleasure of visiting a lot of these countries, but when I went to, China and Japan, it was so much harder to ghost hunt because, again, it's a situation where if they believe it's haunted, you do not go in there. Ghost hunting is a bad thing for them because it just stirs up bad things.
I see a market opportunity.
It is. There's a lot of amazing places I would have loved to have gone into. But then when I went to Rome, it was funny. And this again was before all the television shows. So this is, I think about, 17, 18 years ago, I was in Rome and I wanted to investigate the catacombs. There are lots of ghost stories down there. And I remember talking to the guy in charge and I was asking him, if I can ghost hunt. And of course, there's this communication gap too, because I don't speak Italian.
Yeah.
But he speaks very little English, but he kind of understood what I was trying to get at when it came to ghosts. And it's just like, yeah, we have ghosts, but they didn't understand the concept of ghost hunting. Yes, there's ghosts here. What's the big deal? Why do you want to hang out in a place that's haunted? They just didn't get it. And I was finally able to convince them, to lock me in a certain section of the catacombs for a good, hour. And I got to do a little ghost hunt.
That's quite scary being down there anyway, isn't it?
Oh, but it's still an amazing experience to have. And it was just funny trying to communicate to him the concept of ghost hunting, where I just want to capture the phenomena to validate these stories.
It's funny how the world is so splintered, isn't it?
It is. I mean,
you never hear of, I may be wrong, you never hear of a big ghost culture in Australia. I've never heard any Australian ghost stories ever.
Oh, they're out there.
Oh, really?
They are out there. They definitely have some great places for investigations. I have not had the opportunity to go to Australia, but I would love to. But yeah, there are some haunted places in Australia.
Okay. Just me not paying attention.
What do you mean? You got so many ghosts behind you, It's just like you're busy right there.
What I find weirdest is when I was a kid, I was obsessed. Scooby-Doo, there were always ghost shows on the TV. Even not ghost hunting shows, but documentaries about photographs of ghosts and those kinds of things. And as I got older, you had the capacity to start reading about the occult or witches and things like that. And there is a point that you really grow. You can easily grow out of it, and your kids come along and you get involved in normal life.
The distractions.
Yeah. And it's very easy to just come away from it. And when you come away from it, it's never there. You have to actively be in it. It's not, what am I trying to say? Ghosts were always around when I was a kid, even with adults. But now that generation has kind of gone, and it's not a thing anymore. It's become a TV thing rather than something in your life, that you can, you may see one, which is a shame. I think the culture of ghosts is fascinating. It
definitely is, especially when you're involved in the field and you have the opportunities to have these unique encounters. So I still pursue it, even though I wasn't sure where I was going with it in the beginning.
Do you know where you're going with it now?
Yeah, I have a better idea of what I'm trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
And now, as I am able to put together the equipment that I feel should be in the field now, I think that's going to better advance us. My biggest problem was I'm too afraid to think that the audience, when it comes to ghosts, are too far gone, because they have now watched too many of these shows that sensationalize ghosts, that when it comes to real evidence and real experiences, those are boring to them. They want to hear the stories of the dishes being thrown at them, or being scratched, or, being shoved out a window. That's exciting for them. But when you tell them stories, I just heard a whisper behind my ear, well, that's kind of lame. But that is a valid experience, or being tapped on the shoulder. That's a valid experience. But they want the bigger, the more scarier experiences now.
And then, of course, we all get desensitized the more ghost TV shows we watch.
Exactly. Exactly.
And then you get the crossover with the Conjuring and Annabelle and that sort of extreme ghost fright stuff. And anything scientific is just going to look lame as fuck, right?
Exactly. And that's where we have the biggest challenge ahead of us. Do you want the sensationalism and just those ghost stories, or do you want the hard facts to validate those experiences? And that's where I'm afraid, have we lost our audience? Or are there still people out there looking to validate these experiences, no matter how small they are?
Are there people? Are there? I mean, I know you're in Seattle. I guess. Do you have much contact with other groups who have the same goals, and you can combine to form some kind of force?
Well, there would be nice. It would be nice if there was more unity out there when it comes to the paranormal field.
Right.
But
Everyone wants the big catch.
That's the thing, is you're dealing with all these egos out there now. I'm going to be the one to prove that ghosts exist. And I've always said it's not going to be one person. It's got to be this unity. We have to share information. We have to share our experiences. Or you got the fact that, again, the sensationalism, the lazy ghost hunters are out there. Somebody's out there just to have a television show. I want a series for myself. And so, it's sad. We are losing touch with the reality of real ghost hunting.
Don't lose heart.
No, I really hope that there will be more people. This is why I do this. This is why, I am more than happy to speak on these shows for everybody, because I'm hoping that my word will get out there and inspire others to see that there's so much more we could be doing in this field, rather than just, saying I'm a trained ghost hunter because I've seen every episode of Ghost Adventures.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's not education,
Yeah.
So, I would like to see more groups out there. There are some out there. I would probably say out of every 10, there's probably maybe one, or maybe out of every 20, there's maybe one, because it's far and few that you have people that are very serious about what we're doing.
Did I miss anything? Should I have asked anything?
Should I have asked him anything? No, this is great. I love hearing new questions. It's for me, I do a lot of these shows, and most people want to hear my scariest ghost story.
Yeah.
And, they want to know, how you got involved in it, but and some of the ghost stories from places I've investigated. But no, you added a lot more to this.
There sure is.
Challenging questions.
I guess at the end of the day, we all think of a ghost as the remnants of a dead human being, though the afterglow of a dead human being. But here's a good question for you that I hope you've never been asked before, and then I'll leave you alone. Do ghosts get sick?
Do ghosts get sick?
Yeah. Because
I believe, people have always asked us why, if there's been so many people in the world, we're talking billions of people in the world, why isn't there billions of ghosts?
Yeah.
For every person there, you think there'd be a ghost. And there's different aspects, when it comes to religious beliefs and all that. But I've always said that, again, if we go to the basics of the belief system, that it's just energy, right? There's proof that we are energy, and energy cannot be created or destroyed.
Yep.
What happens? It happens to that energy. Well, it transforms from one state to another. And so maybe, as this energy all comes together, when we all die, all this energy comes together in this one big mass. Maybe that's heaven. I don't know. But I've also believed that energy can be spent. And so if you don't have a constant source feeding that energy, then as it starts to spend its energy itself, it dissipates. And so that's why, some of these, you have these, historic, figures that have been seen, throughout Europe, but after a while, they're never seen again. So what happens? Did it spend all of its energy and now it's no more?
I guess it's like the concept behind American gods, right? Which is as the generations go by and the gods get forgotten, they cease to exist because they have no other energy propping them up.
Exactly. Oh, it's a good theory. Yeah.
No, I've confused myself now. I'll quit while I'm ahead. Listen, thanks for your time.
Anytime.
We should do it again one day.
Definitely. It'd be my pleasure.
Okay.
And hopefully when the borders open up, maybe we can meet in person.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. You take care. Be safe.
You have a good evening.